My friend Tom is such a crazy sock knitter that we call him the Sockinator. He has a wonderful loom knitting group on Facebook called Socks a la Loom, in which he is leading a knit along. To make sure that we have enough support materials for new sock knitters, I'm adding to my Sockumentaries list. All of the Sockumentaries will be useful to you, but the ones that begin with this intro are specifically designed to help with Tom's knit along.
Let's work on our ribbing. There are many kinds of ribbing that you can do in terms of how many knit stitches and how many purl stitches there are. But the classic is knit one, purl one. There's a knit one. Now to do a purl stitch, you bring the yarn around in front, below the original stitch. There's the original stitch. This row, it's really our cast on. Insert the tool into the stitch, flip it around so you pick up a loop of yarn, take it off the peg and replace it. You can see the difference between the knit and the purl on the back side. Let's do that again. We're ready for a knit stitch. And then bring the yarn forward for the purl stitch. Of course, when you're doing it not around the camera, as I am, and after you get used to it, it goes faster than this. For most of us, it never goes as fast as plain knit stitches. But that's okay. You can do as little as an inch of knit one, purl one rib around the top of your sock. My purl stitch didn't want to behave, but it's going to. Or you can do it the whole sock top. That is your choice. In this case, for this sock, I think I'll do about an inch of it. And then we'll switch to a knitted top. Now, ribbing pulls in. That's its job. So it makes a nice fitting sock top that doesn't usually droop. However, some people don't want their sock tops to hug tightly, and some people hate purling. If that's the case, for whatever reason, you do not have to do ribbing. You can do something called a hemmed top, which I have made another video of. And we usually begin our hem tops with plain wraps on purpose. So you can watch that video and decide which top you like. But this sock is going to be a knit one, purl one rib. In this gauge, it's 5 or 6 rows per inch. And honestly, for my first sock, I usually don't decide whether I'm going to do 5 or 6 until I see how it's coming out. Then I will record that number so that I make my second sock match, of course. But I'm probably going to do 5 rows, take a look at it, decide if that's enough ribbing. If not, do another one. We're knitting. And write it down so that I can make my 2 socks match. You also have some control over how tight your ribbing is simply by how tight you're making your stitches. The purl, for many people, comes out a little bit looser than the knit stitch. Here we're purling, and I'll show you how not to make it loose if you don't want to. It's all in how tightly you tug right now. Now, you don't want it overly tight, or it'll be hard to knit the next row. And I don't favor that sort of knitting, though some people do. Remember, your knitting style is not a moral issue. Do what you like and what works for you. The reason to consult experts is to get a good start on learning, not to make the final decision. Here's a purl stitch. Lift, tighten. Now here's a knit stitch. Notice how far I'm wrapping my yarn around. That's really a U-stitch. In other words, the yarn makes the U-shape around the peg. It looks almost just like a flat stitch, but it's looser because that's the tension that I prefer my stitches to be. Let's pretend to make a flat stitch. I don't wrap it around. I have now the yarn just running across in front of the peg. See there? It's barely going to give me any extra. Now I'm going to adjust it so it's as though it's a U-stitch and it will match because that's what I want. Some people prefer the flat stitch, and that's fine. Now, although I don't prefer the E-wrapped ribbing, I'll do a couple and then undo them. That was an E-wrapped stitch. Mostly we don't make E-wrapped purl stitches. We just let them be a looseness that suits us. But that was knit one, purl one ribbing using an E-wrapped stitch. Now I'll get rid of it because I didn't want mine E-wrapped. But if you do, that's fine. It's your choice. So I'm going to continue knitting my knit one, purl one ribbing all the way around until I have an inch of it. Then I'll come back and show it to you and we will move on.